Rich Paul responds to rumors of Lakers beef. A war appears to be brewing within the Los Angeles Lakers organization, and all sides seem to be gearing up for a very public battle. Late last week, word emerged of LeBron James, Rich Paul and the larger Clutch team being unhappy with Rob Pelinka over his inaction ahead of this year's NBA trade deadline. Specifically, it was alleged that they wanted to see Pelinka part with Russell Westbrook and a first-round pick for John Wall of the Houston Rockets. Given James's role in bringing Westbrook to LA in the first place, instead of DeMar DeRozan, the irony of all this was not lost on most. This week, Stephen A. Smith appeared on First Take and personally relayed a message that was given to him by Paul.
Sending a message to LA brass, LeBron showed love to Rams GM Les Snead on Twitter after the Super Bowl for going all in, and now he's praising Thunder GM Sam Presti for making moves as well. Take a listen.
The MVP over there is Sam Presti. He the MVP. I mean, Josh Giddey is great. Sam Presti, I don't understand this guy's eye for talent. He drafted KD, Russ, Jeff Green, Serge Ibaka, Reggie Jackson, Josh Giddey, and the list goes on and on and on. This guy's pretty damn good.
All right, so now on ESPN.com, our Brian Windhorst wrote that LeBron used All-Star Weekend to put the Lakers on notice. James has been offended by Lakers management twice over the past 2 weeks. First, when it elected not to make a deal before the February 10th trade deadline, after he had both publicly and privately prodded for something. More accurately, he expected it. In the second, when Lakers GM Rob Pelinka stepped over the line when he announced James was on board with the status quo. A source told ESPN there was no prior sign-off from James. What James is doing is likely aimed at one primary goal: force the Lakers into major action this summer. He tried to do it nicely, and now he's doing it harshly. Stephen A., I'll start with you. Tell me this. What do LeBron's comments say to you?
Well, what it says to me is that I think that he's pointing the finger at Rob Pelinka, and that's fair, but he has to own some of it himself. LeBron is not innocent in any of this. But before I go any further, Kendrick Perkins, I want to make sure that you knew this. There was a story, I'm reading a story from Yahoo, but also I think it was something in the Bleacher Report. Rich Paul called me yesterday and asked me to quote him on this story about him and Clutch Sports and essentially them wanting the Lakers to trade Russell Westbrook and a first-round pick to Houston for John Wall. He wanted me to state emphatically that there was absolutely positively no truth to that whatsoever. He never did that. He did not do that. The people who wrote the story never contacted him to get any kind of perspective from him on that. It is an absolute lie. And he said, could you please do me a favor and quote me and tell the world that I specifically said that's a damn lie. It's no truth. It never happened. You know, that's just for what it's worth. That's what Rich Paul says about these stories that have been put out there. Fair enough. So I quoted him. Now, LeBron James doesn't get off the hook here. He's playing like an MVP. It's a damn shame the people around him have not. They're the 9th seed, still in position, 4 games under 500 to be in the play-in. And by the way, let's take a moment, KP, to give Portland some love because they'd be in the play-in game if the season were to end today as well. Chauncey Billups, somehow, some way, with this kid Anthony Simons, who's been balling. This brother gonna be worth 25 to 30 million a year. This brother's special, okay? Portland is now in the play-in game. Let's give Chauncey Billups and his staff some love. But to talk about the Lakers, LeBron can't be absolved from this. You got an opportunity to get Buddy Hield. You went with Westbrook. You might have had an opportunity to get DeMar DeRozan. You went with Westbrook. LeBron James ain't innocent in that. You had something to do with the formulation of this roster. So we can point to Rob Pelinka all we want to, and it should be accurate to some degree because you are the GM. Magic Johnson is not there any longer. Rob Pelinka, we didn't forget you got something to do with that because Magic Johnson told us so, okay? And now it's on you, along with Linda and Kurt Rambis, and this is what's been going on in L.A., and so they can't be innocent. They can't be innocent, but I'm not going to sit here and put it all on their shoulders and act like LeBron James had nothing to do with it. You can talk about Sam Presti all you want to, and it's true because Sam Presti has an eye for talent, but it's also important to point out that Sam Presti has never won a championship as an executive. Ever. Not one time. With all that talent. So just like you giving him credit for accumulating all that talent, well, why the hell does Oklahoma City not have one single ring to show for it when you had all the players that he had? Maybe it's because of the coaches that you've chosen. That's another story for another day. But back to LeBron James, you got culpability, bro. I understand what you're saying. You might have a point about that. People talking about shots, not so direct or whatever that you're giving to Rob Pelinka. All I'm saying is don't forget the role you played in it. LeBron James is a basketball savant. But what he showed is why so many people are hesitant to give players control, because sometimes your personal relationships impairs your judgment. And as a result, you end up making the wrong decisions. You don't get to be absolved from that reality just because things are not the way you want them to be when you had everything to do with what made it that way.
You know what? It's a few things to unravel from what LeBron James said. And Stephen A., you know you're 100% right. LeBron James had a lot to do with getting Russell Westbrook, and so did Anthony Davis, okay? They called the shot. It was the reason why Russell Westbrook went to the front office of the Washington Wizards and got to the Lakers. Okay, but in their defense, they didn't know Russ was going to be this bad. They didn't know that he was going to be this bad. They really didn't, Stephen A. Just think about it. You're trading to get a top 75 greatest player of all time, a walking triple-double. You thinking he coming into his hometown, they didn't expect this type of play out of Russell Westbrook. That's to LeBron James' defense and Anthony Davis, okay? Now, to Rob Pelinka, it was moves out there that he could have made at the trade deadline, but he was holding on to that pick. He didn't want to include the pick. He didn't want to do this. That's where the frustration kicked in, along with him actually lying, saying that all of those guys were in agreement when not making a move at the trade deadline, because that was absolutely false. Here's another thing I want to point out to LeBron James about his interview praising Sam Presti. I love Sam Presti. Sam Presti gave me my biggest contract while I was playing in the NBA. Sam Presti was great to me while I was in Oklahoma City. Stood by my side. Sam Presti do have an eye for talent, but Sam Presti also had a co-partner. It was a Robin that he had. That
Troy
I didn't
Weaver.
like how LeBron James, Troy Weaver. And so when we talk about this is the things that guys like LeBron James have to keep in mind when he go up to the podium and he speak on situations like this, because this is why you get those African Americans hired in those positions, is when you go up there and you say, Sam Presti, he drafted this and he got an eye for this. That may be true, but Troy Weaver was right there on this side the whole entire time, scouting those same players.
And he was the liaison with those relationships with the players, those players that were picked. Yes.
Start mentioning those brothers' names. That's the problem I have with that. Mention his name, man.
If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.